How was your day? Maybe part of you was somewhere else the whole time, doing one thing and quietly wishing you were doing another. Half here, half away. There's a young man in the old Irish stories who knew that feeling, a poet, a hunter named Oisín. He had everything at home, and still, the sea kept calling him away. If today felt like that, he'd understand. So let the day go now. Let your shoulders drop. The air here is salt and cold. The sand is wet under your feet. Out on the gray water, something bright is coming closer, and it isn't a ship. And here's the part of the story the old poets always told first. Not the beginning, the end, a gray field, stone walls, an old man on a white horse asking for people who died 300 years ago. How does a young man become that old man? How does anyone lose 300 years? Stay with that question. The story is going to take its time. So can you? To understand the old man, you have to meet the young one first. Before the sea took him, Oisín belonged to a band of warriors called the Fianna, hunters, poets, the best of Ireland. Their leader was his own father, Fionn mac Cumhaill, a gray-bearded giant of a man who had eaten the salmon of knowledge as a boy and carried every old wisdom behind his eyes. This is everyone's story, in a way, the home that holds you, and the bright thing across the water that asks you to leave it. Most of us never have to choose. Oisín did. This is what we do here. One old story told slowly, every week. Something that happened a long time ago and somehow still knows something about tonight. So get comfortable now, adjust your pillow, find your warmth. If you drift off before the end, that's all right. The old gods have watched over sleeping mortals for a very long time. This is only the beginning of it. The far side of the sea, the long years, the loss, all of that is still ahead. But not tonight. Tonight, just this, just the shore. If tonight feels like something, subscribe. We'll be here next week. Another old story, another quiet night like this one. Now, back to ours. It began on an ordinary morning. The Fianna rode out to hunt along the lakes of Killarney, hounds running ahead, the mist still lying low between the hills. Oisín rode at his father's side. He was young then, the kind of young where you think the morning will go on forever and the people beside you will always be there. The hunt led them down toward the western shore. The hounds slowed. The horses grew uneasy, and the mist, thick all morning, began to pull back from the water like a curtain drawn aside. Out of that bright opening, something moved across the surface of the sea. Not a boat, a horse, white and far too large, running on the water as easily as on a road. And on its back rode a woman. Her hair was the color of the morning sun, long enough to move in a wind no one else could feel. The warriors lowered their spears without being told. She came to the water's edge and stopped. She looked over every face on that shore, and then her sea-gray eyes found one young man and stayed. Oisín, she said, as if she had always known him. He did not know her. He was certain of that. And yet, hearing his own name in her mouth, something in him answered before his mind could, as if a door he'd never noticed had quietly opened. "I am Niamh," she said. "Niamh of the golden hair. My father is king of a land you have only heard of in songs, a land where no one grows old and no one weeps for long." The warriors knew the name of that land. Everyone in Ireland did. Tir na Nog, the land of the young, the country under the wave, beyond the western edge of the world. The place you reached only by being chosen. "I have heard your songs across the water," Niamh said to Oisín, "the Fianna's poet, the one whose voice carries even to my father's hall. I did not come to Ireland by chance, I came for you. There is a particular kind of being seen that we spend our whole lives waiting for. Not flattered, not wanted for what we can do, just recognized." Oisín had never felt it before. He felt it now. Fionn stepped forward then, the father, not the chieftain. He had buried friends. He knew the look of someone about to leave, and he knew that some who crossed the western water never came back. "Many tales come out of that country," Fionn said carefully. "Not all of them end the way the songs promise. Time runs strangely there. Ask her, son, ask her about coming home." But Oisín was already half across the water in his heart. That is how it happens, isn't it? The leaving begins long before the feet move. It begins the moment the other place feels more true than this one. Will I be able to return? He asked her. To see my father? To ride again with the Fianna? Neve's smile did not falter. You may return whenever you wish, she said. The horse knows the way. It was the truth, and it was not the whole truth. She did not lie to him. She only let him hear what he most wanted to hear. We have all at some point been on one side of that kindness or the other. She told him of her country then, quietly, the way you describe a thing you love and fear losing. Rivers of clear water, trees always in fruit, a summer with no end, and music that never tired. No one is sick there, she said. No one grows bent or gray. No child buries a parent. No friend stands at a grave. She watched his face as she said it. She knew which of those would reach him. That was the hook, and she knew it. Not the gold, not the endless feasts. The promise that nothing he loved would ever be taken from him again. To a young man who had already seen friends fall, it was almost unbearable to hear. He thought of the friends already gone, the empty places at the fire, and here was a woman telling him those places never had to empty again. Stay with that. It is the truest, most dangerous offer in the world. And you, Oisín asked, why me? Of all the poets and kings, why cross the whole sea for one warrior's son? For the first time, Neve looked away. Because I dreamed your voice, she said, before I ever heard it. So it was not only him being chosen. She had crossed worlds for a feeling she could not fully explain. Two longings, reaching toward each other across the impossible distance of the sea. That is its own kind of old story. The warriors said nothing. They had drawn back, leaving the two of them in a circle of quiet. Only Fionn remained close, watching his son the way you watch a candle near an open window. Come with me, Oisín, Niamh said at last. Not forever, if forever frightens you. Only come and see. The horse will carry us both, and it will carry you home again whenever you ask. Only come and see. Has anyone ever said that to you, about a thing you knew might change everything? Only look. Only try it once. It is never only once. Some part of Oisín already knew that. He reached up anyway. But before he climbed up, he turned back. To his father. To the men he had hunted and sung and slept beside since boyhood. Whatever else was true, he would not leave without facing them. He went to Fionn first. There were no grand words. There rarely are, in the moments that matter most. He simply put his forehead against his father's, the way they had done since he was small. Come back to me, Fionn said. Just that. Not, don't go. He was wise enough to know the going could not be stopped, so he asked only for the return. I will, said Oisín, and he believed it. He believed it the way we all believe such things. Wholly, and without imagining how the world might rearrange itself while our backs are turned. He did not know that a promise can be kept honestly and still be broken by time. Then Oisín climbed up behind Niamh on the great white horse. He felt the warmth of the strange animal, the faint hum of it, like a harp string held just before it sounds. The Fianna raised their spears in farewell. Niamh spoke a word in a language Oisín did not know. The horse turned its head toward the west, and without any leap or hurry, it stepped off the wet sand and onto the surface of the sea itself. Oisín looked back once. The shore was already smaller. His father a gray shape among gray shapes, one hand still raised. He lifted his own hand in answer. Then the mist closed, and Ireland was gone. Here's a thing the story wants you to feel. He did not lose his home in a single great moment. He lost it the way most of us do. Quietly, while looking forward to something else. A hand raised, a mist, and then nothing. The horse ran on. Not fast exactly, but the world moved around it strangely, the way distance does in a dream. The waves rose into green walls on either side, and never once touched the riders. Oisín held to the mane and to the warmth of Niamh before him, and felt the last of his fear loosen. Whatever this was, it was beautiful, and he had always, even as a boy, been unable to look away from beautiful things. How far is your father's country? He asked. Niamh did not turn. Far and near, she said. It is not measured in the way you measure things. We will arrive when the sea decides we have left enough behind. When the sea decides we have left enough behind. He turned the words over and did not fully understand them. He would, in time. We always understand the warnings later, when they have already become the shape of our lives. And so a promise was made on a shore, and a young man rowed out onto the sea. That is where most tellings pause for breath. We will pause too, not the famous part yet. Just the leaving, just the open water. As they rowed, strange sights rose from the water. A walled city far off, glittering and silent. A hound chasing a deer of pure white across the waves, neither ever tiring. The sea here remembered things that had never quite happened. "Don't follow them with your eyes too long," Niamh said gently when she saw him watching the white deer. "The sea between the worlds shows you what you want. It is kinder to look ahead." It is kinder to look ahead. Maybe you know that too. How looking too long at what you've left, or what you wish you had, can keep you from ever truly arriving anywhere. Oisín tried to learn it. He was not very good at it. Few of us are. The light changed. The gray of the mortal sea gave way to a warmer gold. The way late afternoon turns a room amber. Ahead, low on the water, a darker shape was rising. Not a city this time, land. But before they reached it, the gold dimmed. Clouds gathered, low and bruised. The warm sea grew cold and gray again, and the curling walls of water sank away. Something here was wrong, and Niamh's hand tightened on the mane. "This place is not part of my father's country," she said quietly. "It lies on the road between. A giant of the old cold kind keeps it. We must pass, and quickly keep your eyes on the far shore, Oisín, not on the tower." But Oisín, of course, looked at the tower, and at the high barred window, lit by a single torch, he saw a pale face looking back. A young woman. Her hands gripped the iron, her mouth formed a word he could not hear. "Help." "Niamh," he said. "There is a woman in that tower." Niamh did not slow. "I know," she said, and her voice was full of old sorrow. "She has been there a long time. Heroes have tried. None have returned. Look ahead, Oisín. Look ahead." He had been told that twice now, and twice something in him refused. He was Fionn's son. The Fianna did not ride past a window with a hand at the bars. "Set me down," he said. "I cannot leave her there." Before we follow him to that tower, it's worth asking why the old Irish told stories like this at all. Why a land beyond the sea where no one ages, why the bright country always lay to the west. The people who first told this tale lived at the edge of the known world. Past the western cliffs of Ireland, the sea simply went on, into a place no one had sailed back from. So they filled it with what they most longed for. A land with no sickness, no winter, no graves. To people who buried their children and watched their elders fade, that wasn't a fantasy of riches. It was a fantasy of mercy. A place where loss had simply never been invented. But the same people were wise. They knew, somewhere, that a life without loss would also be a life without weight. And so they built a warning into the dream. The bright land always came with a price. It always does in the old songs. So Tir na Nog was never only a paradise. It was a question, dressed as a country. If you could have a life without loss, would you take it? And what, without knowing, would you be giving up? Hold that. The story is asking it of Oisín now. Back on the gray water, Niamh brought the horse to a barren shore beneath the tower. "If you must do this," she said, "then do it as your father's son. The giant is old and cruel, but he is not clever. Use that." She gave him something then, a small flask of clear water from her father's land. "One sip steadies the heart," she said. "Do not drink it all. And Oisín, come back to me. I have only just found you." "I have only just found you." Those were almost the same words his father had used. Come back. Everyone who loved him asked the same thing, in the same breath as letting him go. He tucked the flask away and turned to the tower. The great door of the keep stood open, which was its own kind of trap. The giant feared nothing, so he locked nothing. Inside, the air was cold and wet and smelled of old stone. Somewhere above, a chain dragged across a floor. Here's the part the songs never make obvious. Oisín was not the first to come. The lower hall was hung with the shields of those who had tried before him. He read their names as he passed. Some he had known. It would have been easy to turn back then. Wise, even. But Oisín had already chosen the kind of man he was going to be on that shore when he refused to ride past the window. So he climbed the cold stair toward the dragging chain. At the top, the captive maiden waited behind her bars. Closer now. He saw she was no longer young. The tower had held her many lifetimes. "Go back," she whispered. "He is sleeping. If he wakes, you will hang on that wall below." "Then I had better not wake him." Oisín said, but the old hinge of the cell door betrayed him. It groaned through the whole cold tower, and from the great hall above, a voice like grinding stone answered. The giant was awake. The Fomorian came down the great stair like a landslide, one eye, a single tusk, a club of black bog oak in his fist. He was twice the height of any man, and slow, but slow the way a falling tree is slow. You only need to be under it once. Oisín did not meet the club head-on. His father had taught him better. He moved like water around stone, close, then gone, then close again. The giant's strength was a wall, and a wall, Fionn always said, can be walked around. They fought through the long, cold night. Oisín tired. The giant did not seem to. But Niamh's flask was at his belt, and once when his arm had no strength left, he drank a single sip. Warmth ran through him like a remembered summer. He fought on with new strength, and at last he saw it, what Niamh meant when she said the giant was not clever. The Fomorian always swung the same way first. Right, then down, right, then down. Oisín only had to wait for it. When the club swung right and came down, Oisín was already inside its arc, where the giant could not reach. One clean thrust of the spear, and the great one-eyed shape swayed, surprised, the way the strong always are, when at last they fall. The tower went still, the dragging chain was silent. Oisín stood breathing hard in the sudden quiet, the way you do when a long fear ends and you do not yet trust that it is over. He found the keys on the giant's belt and went down to the cell. The old maiden's hands shook as the door swung open. She did not run, she stood very still, the way people do when they have stopped letting themselves hope for a thing, and it arrives anyway. 300 years, she whispered. I have counted them on the wall. Oisín did not yet understand how those words would one day be his own. He only took her hand and led her down, out of the dark, into the gray morning light. Niamh was waiting on the barren shore, and when she saw him come out alive, the stillness broke in her face all at once. She slid from the horse and crossed the black rocks and held him, and did not speak for a long while. The freed maiden would not come with them. My own country is gone, she said. Everyone I knew is dust. But there is a quiet island west of here where the old freed ones live. Set me there. It is enough to feel the wind again. Her words sat strangely in Oisín's chest. Everyone I knew is dust, he could not imagine it. He was young, and his father was alive, and the Fianna waited at the hill of Allen. Dust was a thing that happened to other people's worlds. They left the freed woman on her quiet green island, and turned the horse west once more. The bruised clouds fell away behind them. The cold gray sea warmed again to gold, and the road to Tir na Nog opened ahead, clear and bright. You did not have to do that, Niamh said as they rode. Most would not have. Many men say they would. You simply did. Oisín shrugged. She had a hand at the bars, he said, and I had a horse that could stop. As if it were that simple. To him it was. This is who he was, and the story wants you to hold it close, because it will matter at the end. Oisín could not pass a thing that needed him. Not a window, not a hand, not a home. It was his great gift. It would also be his undoing. And then at last the land of her father rose before them, not dark and barred like the giant's island, bright, endless, green hills folding into golden distance, and far off, pale towers catching a light that came from everywhere and nowhere. Oisín forgot to breathe. He had heard it described, but description is a small thing beside arrival. The colors were deeper than colors should be. The air itself tasted sweet of honey and cut grass and some flower he had no name for. Welcome home, Niamh said softly, and though it was not his home, not yet, something in him ached to believe her. The word landed in the empty place his lost friends had left, home. He had not known how much he wanted to hear it. They rode up through meadows where no flower ever wilted, past streams of water so clear it seemed to be made of light. People came out to meet them, beautiful, unhurried, ageless. None of them looked a day past their best years. None of them ever would. At the heart of the land stood the palace of the king, Niamh's father, pillars of pale gold, floors of green and white, flowering vines along every arch. And on a high throne, a man crowned in oak leaves of gold, who had never once felt the touch of time. So this is the poet my daughter crossed the world for, the king said. His voice was kind and very old. You are welcome here, Oisín of the Fianna. Stay as long as you wish. Here, as long as you wish has no end. As long as you wish has no end. The king meant it as the greatest of gifts. And it was a gift, but there's something in those words, isn't there? That does not only comfort. Time that cannot run out is also time that cannot be measured. Oisín did not notice. Not yet. That night there was a wedding. Oisín and Niamh joined under the flowering arches, while harpers played and the whole bright land rejoiced. He had crossed the sea, faced a giant, and won a princess in a paradise. By every measure of the old songs, this was the happy ending. By every measure of the old songs, this was the ending. And yet the story is barely half told, because the old Irish knew something the songs only hint at. Sometimes getting everything you wanted is not the end of the tale. Sometimes it is only the beginning of the longing. So Oisín began his life in Tir na Nog, and the first thing the bright land gave him was ease. No hunger he could not answer, no cold, no weariness that a single night did not wash away. He hunted in forests where the deer ran for the joy of it and never bled. He sang in halls where his voice never tired and his cup never emptied. Niamh was always near. For a long while, he wanted nothing he did not already hold. They were happy, truly happy. The story does not pretend otherwise, and neither will I. There were years of it, though years is the wrong word for a place where time does not turn. There was simply joy, and more joy, with no edges to mark where one ended. And here's something gentle and strange. Because there were no edges, he could not feel the time passing. A day and 100 years weighed exactly the same. The bright land was kind that way. It asked you to notice nothing, and so you noticed nothing. In time, though it was no time, there were children. A son with his mother's golden hair, a daughter with her father's gray-green eyes. Oisín held them in the sourceless light and thought his heart could hold no more. For a while that was true. He named them in the language of the Fianna. Old Irish names, from a green island under a different sky. And it was in the naming, in reaching back for the words of home, that the first small ache stirred in him. He did not recognize it, not at first. It came back at odd moments, a scent of cut grass that was almost but not quite the grass of Ireland, a turn of melody that reminded him of a song his father used to sing. Small things, the kind you can brush away. He brushed them away. This is the quiet truth at the center of the whole story. Paradise did not fail him by being cruel. It failed him by being perfect, and a perfect thing, with nothing to push against, slowly stops feeling like anything at all. Niamh saw it before he did. She had watched mortals before. She knew the shape of this ache, the small distant look, the songs that turned more and more toward a green island in the east. She said nothing, she only held him closer and hoped. He found a high green cliff top at the eastern edge of the land. A lone thorn tree leaned there, bent by a wind that came from the mortal sea. He began to go there often, to stand and look east, and tell himself he was only enjoying the view. Maybe you know that cliff top, the place you go to look toward something you left. You tell yourself you're only resting there, but your feet keep carrying you back, and you begin to understand that part of your heart never finished the journey. On the clearest days he imagined he could see it, a low gray line at the very edge of sight. Ireland, his father, the hill of Allen. He knew it was likely only mist, shaped by wanting, but wanting is a powerful shaper of mist. He began, almost without meaning to talk about home, to his children at first. Stories of the Fianna, of his father who had eaten the salmon of all knowledge, of hunts in the rain, and fires in the timber hall, and friends with loud laughs and louder snores. The children loved the stories, but they did not understand them. How could they? They had never been cold, never been hungry, never lost anyone. The very things that made his home precious to him were things they had no words for. That was the loneliest part. Not being apart from home, but living among people who could not feel why it mattered. To love a place no one around you remembers is a quiet kind of solitude. Oisín carried it gently, but he carried it everywhere now. Niamh tried to fill the empty place. She showed him new wonders, islands of singing birds, gardens that bloomed in colors with no names, caverns of soft light beneath the sea. He marveled at all of it, and then, quietly, he went back to the cliff top. "What can I give you?" she asked him one evening. "That I have not already given?" He took her hands. "Nothing," he said honestly. "You have given me everything. That is the strange part. I have everything, and still I dream of rain on a gray hill. I dream of rain on a gray hill. Of all the lines in this old story, that is the one I would keep. He did not long for something better than paradise. He longed for something realer, for weather, for a world that could be lost and so could be loved. Niamh understood. That was the hardest thing of all. She did not argue or accuse or pretend not to see. She only grew quieter and held him in the night and waited for the day she knew was coming, the day he would ask to go. But that day was not yet. The story gives them a little more time first, and so will we, because before the longing won, there was one more adventure in the bright land. One more time, Oisín could not pass a thing that needed him. Word came to the palace of a trouble at the land's far border. A gray tide had begun creeping up one shore, a slow, cold mist that touched the deathless flowers and, where it passed, left them wilted. In Tir na Nog, a wilted flower was a kind of horror. No one in the bright land knew what to do. They had never faced decay. They had no word for it, no defense against it. But Oisín came from a world made of change and loss. Of all of them, only he was not afraid of a wilting thing. "I will go and see," he said. And for the first time in longer than he could measure, something in him woke fully up. A problem, a need, a thing he might be useful for. He had not known how much he missed being needed until he was, again. Niamh rode with him to the border. The blight, when they reached it, was worse than the messengers had said. A whole headland gone gray and still, and at its heart, half sunk in the wilted grass, lay something that did not belong in the bright land at all. It was a piece of the mortal world. The story is not always clear how a fragment of gray rock, sea-worn, with a broken iron ring set in it, as though torn from some ordinary Irish harbor and washed impossibly onto this deathless shore. That was the secret of the blight. The mortal world and the deathless one were never meant to touch. Where they did, each unmade the other. The gray stone wilted the flowers, and the flowers in turn were slowly dissolving the stone to nothing. Remember that, for later. The two worlds were never meant to touch. Where they met, something had to give. It is a small detail now, half buried in a field of wilted flowers. It will not stay small. The whole ending turns on it. The answer was simple and hard. The mortal stone had to be carried back out, beyond the border of the land, and cast into the sea between the worlds, where neither could harm the other. And it had to be carried by someone the gray stone could not wither, by a mortal. So Oisín gathered the gray stone into his arms. It was heavy and cold, and smelled of the sea, of his sea, the gray Atlantic of home. Holding it, he felt the old world press against his chest like a living thing. He almost did not want to let it go. That moment frightened Niamh more than any giant had, because she saw it plainly now. It was not that her husband loved the mortal world's beauty. He loved its very griefs. He loved the cold, and the loss, and the weight, and those she could never give him. They rode together to the very edge of the land, where the bright country fell away into the sea road between the worlds. Oisín stood at the brink, the gray stone in his arms, the dividing sea before him, and for a long moment he did not throw it. To throw the stone was to throw away the last piece of home he could touch. He knew it had to be done. The land was dying where the worlds met. But knowing a thing must be let go, and being able to open your hands, these are not the same. They never are. Niamh came and stood beside him. She did not tell him to let go. She only put her hand over his on the cold gray stone and held it there. "I know," she said softly. "I know what it costs you. I have always known." And with her hand over his, it became possible. Together they opened their hands. The gray stone fell, turning, down the long bright air, and met the dividing sea, and was gone in a ring of silver light. The blight on the headland began slowly to heal. The land was saved. By every measure, Oisín had done a good and necessary thing. The ageless folk would sing of it. But as he watched the silver ring fade on the sea, he understood finally and fully what he had been hiding from himself all this long bright while. He had thrown away the stone, but he could not throw away the longing it had woken. It was in him now, all the way down. He did not merely miss Ireland. He needed to set his own 2 feet on it once more, or some part of him would never rest again. He did not ask Niamh that day. He was not cruel, and he could see her grief. He waited. He held his children. He sang at the feasts. But the asking sat in his chest now like the gray stone had, heavy, cold, and impossible to set down on his own. This is the part the myths never make obvious. The hardest crossing in the whole story is not the sea, and not the giant. It is the small distance between a man's heart and his wife's, when he must ask her to let him go toward the one thing she cannot follow him into. Niamh saw the question in him grow. She had known it was coming since the wedding feast, since the first faraway look. And one quiet evening, she decided she would not make him carry the weight of asking alone. She would speak first. "You wish to see Ireland again," she said. Not a question. He could not answer at first. Then slowly, he nodded. "I am happy here," he said. "I want you to believe that. And still, yes. I need to stand on that green ground once more. I am sorry. I have tried not to need it." "I know," she said again. It was what she always said. "I know." She had loved a mortal with open eyes, knowing this day would come. "You will take the white horse," she told him. "It knows the road home. It will carry you there and carry you back to me." But her face, as she said it, was not the face of someone sending a husband on a happy errand. There was something held back, a warning not yet spoken. He saw it. "What is it?" he asked. "What are you not telling me, Niamh?" She drew a breath. And then she gave him the warning that the whole story has been quietly walking toward since the very first shore. "When you reach Ireland," she said, "you must not get down from the horse. You must not let your feet touch the ground, not once, not for anything." "Why?" he asked. "What harm is there in Irish ground? I have walked it all my life." Niamh's voice trembled, just once, "Because time has not forgotten you," she said. "It has only been waiting, and the moment your foot touches mortal earth, all of it will find you at once." He did not fully understand. How could he? In Tir na Nog, time was a thing that did not move. He could not feel the years that had piled up behind him in the mortal world, silent and patient as snow on a roof. But he loved her, so he promised, "I will not touch the ground." "I will not touch the ground." Such a small promise, such an easy one to keep, surely. Stay on the horse, look and speak, and come home. He could not imagine how a man might break a vow so simple. The story knows, the story has always known, but it lets him have this last peaceful night. In the morning, the white horse stood ready at the palace gate. Its silver mane drifted as it had on the day it first crossed the sea. Oisín's children clung to him, not understanding why their father's eyes were wet, only that something in the bright world was, for once, changing. Niamh came to him last. She did not weep, or if she did it where he could not see. She only repeated the warning, very softly, with her forehead against his. "Do not touch the ground, whatever you find there. Whoever needs you, stay on the horse and come home." Whoever needs you. She knew him. She knew his great flaw and his great gift were the same thing, that he could not pass a hand that reached for help. She was telling him as plainly as love allowed, "This time you must." He nodded. He did not yet know how hard that would be. Before he rides, let us pause once more, because that small warning, "Do not touch the ground," is older than this story. The Irish told many tales of the other world, and almost all of them turn on a single rule. A thing you must not do, a door you must not open. Do not eat the food of the dead. Do not look back at your beloved. Do not speak the name. Do not touch the ground. Different stories, one shape. A gift, given freely, with one small condition that holds the whole gift together. Why did the old storytellers love this shape so much? Maybe because they knew something true about us, that we are rarely undone by the great temptations. We are undone by the small ones, the one rule we were sure we could keep. And maybe because every one of these stories is really about the same impossible wish, to visit the place we have lost, our childhood, our dead, our old home, and to come back unchanged. The old Irish knew. You can go back, but you cannot touch it, not without paying. So when Niamh said, "Do not touch the ground," she was not being strange or cruel. She was speaking the oldest law of the other world. The past is a country you may ride through, but the moment you try to stand in it again, it claims everything time was owed. Now, Oisín rides. The white horse carried him east, back across the bright meadows, down to the shining shore where the sea road waited. He did not look back. He had learned at last the lesson of the crossing. It is kinder to look ahead. This time he managed it. The horse stepped onto the sea. The golden light of the bright land thinned behind him, and slowly, mile by impossible mile, the warm gold of the other world gave way to the cold familiar gray of his own sea. The gray he had dreamed of. The gray of home. His heart lifted at the gray. Is that not a strange thing? He had lived in endless summer, and here he was, gladdened by a cold and colorless sea, because it was his. We do not love a place for being perfect. We love it for being ours. He had forgotten that. Now he remembered. And then, at the very edge of sight, a low gray line. Not mist this time. Land. Real, solid, rain-washed land. The cliffs of Western Ireland rising from the sea exactly where he had left them. He almost wept. He pressed the horse onward toward home. The white horse came up out of the surf onto the same pale sand where it had first carried him away. The same headlands, the same wet black rocks. For a moment, standing there, Oisín felt that no time had passed at all. He was home. Nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. That is what he thought. And here gently, the story begins to break your heart, because everything had changed. He simply could not see it yet. The coastline does not age. The hills do not age. It is the people, only the people who slip away. He rode inland, toward the hill of Allen, toward his father's hall. The road was where it had always been, but the road he began to notice was wider, smoother, worn by far more feet than the Fianna's few. He frowned and rode on and told himself it was nothing. Then he passed people on the road, and they were strange to him, smaller, somehow, bent with work. They stared at the great white horse and its tall bright rider, as though he were something out of a story, which by then, though he did not know it, he was. He called down to them in the old tongue of the Fianna. Friends, which way to the hill of Allen? I am looking for Fionn mac Cumhaill and his warrior band. The people looked at one another, and then one old man answered, in words shaped strangely but understandable. What he said stopped Oisín's heart. Fionn mac Cumhaill, the old man said slowly. Sir, Fionn and the Fianna are stories. Tales we tell the children by the fire on winter nights. They lived long ago. 300 years, the old songs say. Maybe more. No one knows for certain anymore. 300 years. The words the freed maiden in the tower had whispered. The words he had not understood. Now they fell on him like cold water. While he had loved and feasted and watched his children grow in the land of no time, 300 years had passed here. His whole world was gone. His father, the Fianna, every voice that had ever called his name across a fire, all of them dust, as the freed maiden had said. Everyone I knew is dust. He had not been able to imagine it then. He did not have to imagine it now. He was standing in it. This is the cruelty hidden inside the gift. Tir na nog had promised him a world without loss, and it had kept that promise by stealing the entire world he might have lost. He had not had to bury his father. He had simply skipped past him and arrived too late to even say goodbye. He almost turned the horse around then, back to the sea, back to Neve, back to the only home he had left, but he could not yet. He had to see it with his own eyes. He had to ride to the hill of Allen and stand where the hall had stood, even if nothing remained. He rode for a day toward the hill of Allen, and the land grew stranger and more familiar at once. The shape of the hills he knew, but the woods were felled where woods had stood, and new stone churches rose where there had been only oak and open sky. The very gods had changed while he was gone. The old ways he had known, the offerings at the wells, the songs to the spirits of the hills, these were fading. A new faith had come to Ireland, gentle and certain, with its bells and its crosses and its one quiet God. He was not only late to his father's death, he was late to his whole age. The world of the Fianna, the hunts, the heroes, the old bright pagan Ireland had ended, quietly, while he feasted across the sea. He was the last living piece of a vanished world, riding through its replacement. And still, through all of it, he kept his promise. He did not get down from the horse. Not to drink at a stream, not to rest in the heat of the day. Neve's warning held him fast. Stay on the horse. Whatever you find, whoever needs you. He held to it. He was so close. At last he came to the hill of Allen, and there was nothing. No hall, no fire, no spears against the wall, no hounds by the hearth, no laughter on the evening air, only a green mound, and grazing sheep, and the wind moving through grass where his whole life had once been. He sat there a long time. He did not speak. There was no one to speak to. The man who had eaten the salmon of all knowledge, the father who had said, "Only come back to me," there was not even a stone left to mark where he had laughed and lived and grown old, waiting for a son who did not return. Maybe you have stood somewhere like that. A house that is someone else's now. A street that has forgotten you. The strange grief of a place that stayed, while everyone who made it home went on without you. Oisín felt all of it at once, 300 years of it. At last he understood what Neve had tried to tell him, and what the freed maiden had known, and what the old stories had always meant. You cannot go home. Not really. Home is not a place. It is a time, and time is the one country no horse can carry you back into. So he turned the white horse west again, toward the sea, toward Niamh and his children, and the only home left to him now. The bright land he had been so desperate to leave. He had come all this way to learn that what he longed for no longer existed. It was a hard, clean lesson. He meant to carry it home. He had kept his promise the whole way. He had not touched the ground once, and now he only had to ride back to the shore and let the horse carry him over the sea, and he would be safe and home and whole. He was so close to keeping the simple rule, so close. And here the story tightens. Because it would be too cruel for him to fall to some great temptation, a treasure, a throne. The old stories are wiser than that. He does not fall to anything grand at all. He falls, as we nearly always do, to something very small, and something very like himself. As he rode through a stony valley, he came upon two men at the roadside. They were trying to lift a great marble block to build a wall, and it had slipped and pinned one of them against the earth. The man was crying out. The other could not free him. They were not strong enough. And there it was, a hand reaching up for help. The one thing in all the worlds that Oisín had never, ever been able to ride past. A window with a hand at the bars, a captive in a tower, a man crushed beneath a stone, his whole nature bent toward it before his mind could catch him. He remembered the promise. Stay on the horse, whoever needs you. He gripped the mane. He told himself, ride on, find others, send help. But the men were weak with effort, and the stone was crushing the life from the trapped one even as he watched, and there was no one else on that empty road, only him. This is the part where the whole story holds its breath, because Oisín is being asked an impossible thing. To keep his vow, he must let a man die in front of him. To save the man, he must break the one rule that holds his whole life together. There is no good answer, there is only who he is. He thought he had found a way to keep both. He would not dismount, he would not touch the ground. He would simply lean down from the saddle while staying on the horse and lift the great stone with his own strong arms and free the man and ride on. Clever, careful, almost enough. He set his hands beneath the marble. He braced, and with the great strength the bright land had given him, he heaved the enormous stone up and off the trapped man, who scrambled free, gasping, alive. Oisín had done it. He had saved the man and kept his feet from the ground. For one heartbeat he had won. But the stone was too heavy, even for him, and as he lifted it, leaning so far from the saddle, the great effort told. The golden girth strap of the saddle, the one thing he had not thought of, stretched and strained, and with a small sound, it snapped. A small sound, a snapping strap, 300 years undone by a buckle. He had faced a giant and not fallen. He had crossed the sea between the worlds, and now, leaning down to help a stranger lift a stone, the most ordinary failure of all reached up and took him. The world slowed. Oisín felt himself falling, and he knew, in the long-stretched instant of it, exactly what was coming. He reached for the mane. He reached for anything. There was nothing to hold, and the green Irish ground, the ground he had crossed a whole sea to touch again, rose up to meet him. And he touched the ground. Just that. A man falling from a horse onto grass. The smallest, most human thing in the world. But for Oisín, it was the breaking of the oldest law. The mortal earth took hold of him, and 300 years, patient and waiting, came due all at once. The white horse, feeling the saddle gone and the rider fallen, reared once. It looked back at him, those great dark liquid eyes, full of something almost like grief, and then, knowing it could not stay, it turned west and ran for the sea, back toward Niamh, carrying the news she had always feared. And then the two laborers, turning from their freed friend to thank their rescuer, cried out in terror. For where a tall, bright young warrior had fallen, there was no young man at all. There was an old, old man, frail, white-haired, withered, 300 years old in a single breath. His strong arms had gone thin and trembling. His copper-brown hair had turned to white wisps. The fine clothes of the other world hung loose on a body suddenly bent and small. He lay in the grass and looked at his own ruined hands and could not understand at first that they were his. He had crossed the whole sea to come home, and in the very moment he touched home, home took everything the bright land had been holding back. His youth, his strength, his 300 borrowed years, all of it gone in the time it takes to fall from a horse onto the grass. And the cruelest part, the part the story makes you sit with, is that he had broken the vow doing the one thing that made him most himself. He fell because he stopped to help a stranger. The very kindness that defined him was the thing that undid him. His gift and his ruin, the same hand reaching down. So this is where one ending falls, and another begins. The young warrior is gone. The bright land is lost to him forever. No horse will come back across that sea. He is an old man, alone in a country that forgot him centuries ago. And yet his story is not quite over, because someone is coming down that road, and he is carrying a small bronze bell. The robed man knelt beside him in the grass. He was old too, but ordinarily old, mortally old, with kind weathered eyes and a small bronze cross at his chest. He set down his staff and his bell, and took the withered hand of the fallen stranger gently in his own. "Easy now, old friend," the monk said. "You have had a hard fall. Lie still." Oisín looked up at the kind, unfamiliar face. "Who are you?" he whispered, in the old tongue. The monk understood it, barely. "They call me Patrick," he said, "and you are safe, whoever you are." They lifted him carefully, the monk and the two frightened laborers, and bore him to the nearby monastery, a low stone chapel, a round tower, a garden of herbs inside a sheltering wall. They laid him on a bench in the sun, wrapped him warm, and let him rest. For days Oisín did not speak much. He grieved. Who would not? He had lost his father, his friends, his strength, his youth, and the bright land all at once. He lay in the herb garden and watched the gray Irish clouds move and felt, for the first time in centuries, the ordinary weight of being mortal. Patrick did not press him. He simply came each day and sat beside the old stranger and shared his bread and waited. He had spent his life learning to listen to people whose worlds had ended. He could see this one carried a grief older and stranger than most. And slowly, because grief carried alone grows too heavy, Oisín began to talk. "You think me a poor mad old man," he said one evening, "fallen from a horse, raving of fairylands. But I will tell you who I am, monk, and you will not believe me, and it will still be true." "I am Oisín," he said, "son of Fionn mac Cumhaill, of the Fianna." Patrick went very still, for these were not names of living men. These were the names from the oldest songs, the heroes of 3 centuries past, half-believed, sung by firelight to wide-eyed children. And here was an old man claiming to be one of them. Here is the quiet new tension of the story. Patrick belonged to the New Ireland, the Ireland of one God, of bells and books and gentle order. Oisín belonged to the old, of many gods, of wild hunts and bright fairy seas. 2 whole worlds, sitting on one bench. And they did not agree. At first they argued gently. Patrick spoke of his God, of mercy, of a heaven beyond death. Oisín shook his white head. "Your heaven sounds like a quiet place," he said. "I have seen the bright land across the sea. There was music there, and hunting, and no quiet at all. Do not tell me of heaven, monk. I have lost a better one." This is the part the story most wants to be remembered. Patrick did something rare for his age. He did not try to erase the old man's world. He listened to it. He sent for ink and vellum, and he said, "Then tell me of it, Oisín. Tell me of Fionn and the Fianna and the bright land. Let it not be lost. Let me write it down. Stay with this. It matters more than the fall. Because here in this small monastery garden, the old world did not simply die. It was carried across, by an old man's voice and a monk's patient hand, into the new. The bright land would survive, not in fairy seas, but in ink, in story, in the very telling you are hearing now." So Oisín told it all. The shore, the golden woman on the white horse, the sea road, and the giant's tower, and the freed maiden who had counted 300 years on a wall, never guessing he would one day count them too. He told of Tir na Nog, the deathless flowers, the endless feasts, the children with his eyes, and the slow ache that no paradise could cure, the dream of rain on a gray hill. Patrick listened, and the young scribe wrote, and the light moved across the garden as the tale unspooled. And he told of Neve. Always when he came to her, his voice softened and slowed. "She warned me," he said. She knew. She told me 100 times, do not touch the ground. And I broke it, not for gold, not for glory, but to lift a stone off a stranger's leg. Such a small, foolish human thing. Do you grieve the fall? Patrick asked him once. The old man was quiet a long while. No, he said at last. I would lift the stone again. A man was dying. What is a vow worth, if you keep it by letting a man die in the dirt? Niamh knew that of me. It is why she loved me, and why she warned me, both at once. That answer changed something between them. Patrick had thought he was saving a soul from a heathen past. He began to understand he was sitting beside something nobler than he had expected. A man who had broken a sacred vow rather than abandon a dying stranger. There was, Patrick thought, more of his own God in that than the old man knew. But the grief did not leave Oisín. How could it? Each night he dreamed of the bright land, of Niamh's hair, of his children's voices. And each morning he woke an old man in a gray stone cell, with the whole sea between him and everyone he loved, and no horse left to cross it. Sometimes he would go to the western wall of the monastery, and look out toward the sea he could no longer reach, and wonder if Niamh stood on her far green cliff doing the same. Two people, on two shores of an uncrossable water, each looking toward the other. The story does not say whether either could feel the other looking. I like to think they could. Will I see her again? He asked Patrick once, very low. The monk did not give him an easy lie. I do not know the roads of her country, he said gently. But I know this. Love that is real does not end where a road ends. It waits. Yours has waited 300 years already. I do not think it will stop now. Day by day, the tale grew on the vellum. Page after page of the old bright world, set down in careful ink, the hunts, the heroes, the fairy sea. Oisín gave it all to Patrick, the way a dying man gives away everything he owns. Not to lose it, but so that it might outlast him. And in the giving, something in him began very slowly to heal. Not the grief that would never leave, but the loneliness. For 300 years he had been the only one who remembered Fionn, the Fianna, the bright land. Now another knew. The remembering was no longer his to carry alone. Maybe you know that too. How a grief you carry alone is almost too heavy to bear, and how it changes just a little the moment one other person truly knows it. The loss is the same, but you are no longer the only one holding it. That is not nothing for Oisín. It was almost everything. The old pride softened in him, though it never quite died. He still argued with Patrick about heaven and the gods. He still sang the old songs too loud for a quiet monastery, but there was a peace growing under the grief now. The peace of a man who has set down, at last, a thing too heavy to hold forever. One evening, near the end of his telling, Oisín asked the monk a question he had been holding a long time. When I am gone, he said, will you let them burn these pages? Old heathen songs in a Christian house. Surely your brothers will want them gone. Patrick laid his hand flat on the finished pages. No, he said. These will be kept, copied, guarded. Long after you and I are dust, Oisín children will hear of Fionn in the Fianna and the bright land across the sea. I promise you that. Your world will not be burned. It will be remembered. And it was a promise the monk would keep. The very fact that you know this story tonight, 1,000 years and more since that garden, is the proof of it. The bright land did not sink beneath the waves of forgetting. An old man's grief and a monk's mercy carried it all the way to you. So the great loss of the story turned quietly into something else. Oisín had lost everything he set out to keep. His youth, his home, his bright land, his Niamh. But in losing them, and in telling them, he had given them a different kind of forever. Not the deathless ease of Tir na Nog. The deeper forever of a story that will not die. There is a little more to tell, of how his last days passed, and what the old stories say became of him, and whether the white horse ever came again to the western shore. We will come to it gently. The hardest part is behind us now. What remains is quieter. A kind of long evening after a long, long day. For now, let the old man rest on his bench in the cooling air. The day's last gold on his white hair. The finished book of his whole world safe beside him. He is grieving still, but he is no longer alone. And his story, against every law of time, has found its way home after all. Breathe slow now. The sharpest part of the tale has passed. What is left is softer, the meaning of it, the things it has quietly been teaching all along, and a last quiet farewell on a western shore. Stay if you can. Drift if you must. The story will hold you either way. The days at the monastery settled into a gentle rhythm. Morning bread, the scratch of the scribe's quill, long afternoons in the herb garden where the old man told and the monk listened, and in the telling, the bright world of the Fianna rose again, just for a little while. "Tell me of your father as a boy," Patrick asked one morning, before he was a legend, when he was only a child. And Oisín smiled, the first true smile the monk had seen on him. "Ah," he said, "now that is a good story. It begins with a salmon and a burned thumb." There was a salmon, Oisín said, that swam in a deep pool beneath a hazel tree. For years it had eaten the nuts that fell from those branches, and the hazel held all the wisdom of the world. So the salmon slowly became the wisest creature in Ireland. Whoever ate of it first would hold that wisdom forever. An old poet caught the salmon at last, after 7 years of trying. He gave it to his young servant boy Fionn to cook, with one command: do not taste it. The wisdom was meant for the poet alone. Fionn set the fish over the fire and turned it and waited. A blister rose on the cooking fish. Without thinking, the boy pressed it down with his thumb and burned himself, and put his thumb in his mouth to ease the sting. And so it was Fionn, not the poet, who first tasted the salmon of all knowledge. By an accident, by a burned thumb. The way so many of the great things happen. Ever after, Oisín said, when my father needed to know a hidden thing, he had only to put that thumb to his lips, and the knowledge came. He knew the weather before it turned. He knew a lie before it finished. He knew, I think, that I would leave him. He never said so, but he knew. Patrick was quiet a while. "He knew you would leave," he said, "and he let you go anyway, and his last words to you were, 'Come back to me.'" Oisín lowered his head. "Yes," he said, "and I did come back. 300 years too late, but I came back. I hope, somehow, he knows I came back." He told of the Fianna's life. How they lived half the year in the king's hall and half in the wild greenwood, hunting and sleeping under the stars. How no man could join them unless he was a poet as well as a warrior, for the Fianna believed that a man who could not feel beauty was not safe to be trusted with a sword. A man who could not feel beauty was not safe with a sword. The monk wrote that line down twice. It was, he thought, a wisdom worth keeping. The old pagan Fianna and his own gentle faith were not so far apart, perhaps, as he had first believed. Both knew that strength without tenderness is only danger. He told of the great hunts, of a white stag that led the whole band a merry chase across half of Ireland and was never caught, of his own hound, swift and grey, who had slept against his side every cold night of his young life, and whose name he still spoke softly, 300 years on. It is a strange thing, what the heart keeps. He had lost his father, his friends, a whole age of the world. And here, after everything, it was the warmth of a sleeping hound against his ribs that brought tears to his eyes. The small things. They are always the small things, you know this. So do I. He told of the Fianna's code, that they would protect the weak, and never refuse a guest, and never turn from a hand that reached for help. And as he said that last part, his voice caught, for it was that very code, never turn from a hand that reaches, that had cost him everything on the road. "You see, monk," he said quietly, "I did not break my vow despite being a man of the Fianna. I broke it because I was a man of the Fianna. I could not have done otherwise and still been myself. The vow and the man could not both survive, so the man survived and the vow fell. I would not change it, but oh, what it cost." The man survived and the vow fell. Hold that line a moment, because there is a kind of failure that is also a kind of faithfulness. Oisín failed Niamh's warning, but he kept faith with who he was. The story does not call him a fool for it, neither should we. It calls him human. That is the gentler word. As the weeks passed, Oisín grew frailer. The borrowed centuries pressed harder on him now. He tired more quickly, he slept more, but he was determined to finish the telling before the end, to pour every last drop of the bright world onto the safe shore of the vellum before he himself was carried off. And while he told his tale in the grey monastery garden, far across the western sea, in the bright land that does not change, someone was waiting. The story turns to her now, to Niamh, because she had felt it, the moment the white horse came back to her shore alone. The great white horse had come up out of the dividing sea with no rider on its back and a broken girth strap trailing, and Niamh, seeing it, had not needed to be told. She had known since the wedding feast that this day might come. Knowing had not made it lighter. It never does. She did not weep where the children could see. She gathered them close instead, the golden-haired boy and the gray-eyed girl, and she told them gently that their father had gone home to his own country and could not return. The girl who had her father's eyes asked, "Will we see him again?" And Neve did not lie. "I do not know," she said, "but I will never stop looking east." "I will never stop looking east." And she did not. The old stories say that Neve of the golden hair still stands sometimes on a high green cliff at the eastern edge of her deathless land, gazing across the sea toward Ireland, toward the place her mortal husband fell and could not rise, looking, always looking. There's something almost unbearable in that, and almost beautiful. He looked west toward her from a gray monastery wall. She looked east toward him from a bright, deathless cliff. Two faithful gazes, crossing somewhere over the middle of the sea, in a place neither of them could ever reach, held apart, still holding on. Maybe you have loved across a distance like that. Not a sea, perhaps, but a distance all the same. Someone you cannot reach and cannot stop reaching toward. The old story does not promise that such longing is ever fully answered. It only honors it. It says, this faithfulness mattered, even unfinished, even across an uncrossable sea. The children grew, slowly, in the way of that ageless place. The boy with golden hair took to standing beside his mother on the cliff. The gray-eyed girl took to song. She would sing the old Irish airs her father had taught her, half in a tongue she had never heard spoken on its own soil. The bright land had a little of Ireland in it now, carried by a child's voice. So in a strange way, both shores kept him. On the gray shore, his story was being set down in ink, carried into the new age. On the bright shore, his songs were being sung by his daughter, carried through the deathless years. He had fallen between two worlds, but each world had quietly chosen to remember him. Back in the garden, the monk asked the question that had been growing in him. Oisín, if the horse could not return for you, is there truly no road back to her, no way across at all? The old man was quiet. Only one, he said at last. The road every mortal walks, the one I gave up 300 years of youth to avoid. Death, monk. Only death leads west now. Then you are not afraid of it, Patrick said softly, of dying. Oisín shook his head slowly. I was once, he said, when I was young and the world was bright and full of friends. That fear is why I crossed the sea in the first place. But now the bright land lies on the far side of that door. Why would I fear the door that leads home? It was a remarkable turn. The man who had fled death across a whole sea, who had traded his father's last years to escape it, that same man now spoke of it as a door home. Paradise had not cured his fear of dying. Grief had. Love had. He had something on the far side now, and a man with something waiting does not fear the crossing. Patrick, who had spent his life teaching people not to fear death, found himself learning it freshly from an old pagan. There are some truths, he saw, that every age and every faith arrives at by its own road, that love outlasts the body, that home is worth crossing anything to reach, that the door is not an ending. They had come to the same hill by different paths. The telling neared its end. There was little of the bright world left to set down. Oisín had given the monk almost everything now, every hunt, every hero, every shining hall. The book had grown thick and beautiful, capital letters wound with knotwork, the whole lost age alive on its pages. There is one thing more, Oisín said. Not a tale, a wish. When my time comes, bury me facing west, toward the sea, toward her, so that even in the long sleep I am still turned the right way, still looking. Will you do that for me, monk? Patrick took his hand. I will, he said. Bury me facing west, toward her, so that even in the long sleep I am still turned the right way. Of all the things the old man asked, that was the one the monk never forgot. To stay faithful even in sleep, to keep looking even past the end. We will come back to that wish. It matters, at the close. The seasons turned. Oisín saw one last autumn from the garden bench. The leaves of the monastery's single apple tree went gold and then brown, and fell, and he watched them fall with something like tenderness. In the bright land, no leaf had ever fallen. He had missed this, the falling, the ordinary faithful dying of the year. He had spent his youth fleeing exactly this, decay, change, the turning of things toward their end. And now, at the close of an impossibly long life, he found he loved it. The falling leaf was dearer to him than all the deathless flowers of Tir na Nog, because the falling leaf was true. It had somewhere to go. Here, perhaps, is the deepest turn the whole story makes. Oisín went to the deathless land to escape death and came home, at the very end, in love with mortal life. Not despite its endings, because of them. A thing that can be lost is a thing that can be truly held. He had learned it too late to keep his youth, but not too late to understand. A thing that can be lost is a thing that can be truly held. If you take one line from this old story into your sleep tonight, let it be that one. It is why your own brief, breakable life is so precious, not in spite of its ending, because of it. The old Irish knew, Oisín learned it the long way, you can have it for free. As winter came on, Oisín kept more to his cell. Patrick visited each evening, and they spoke less of tales now and more of small things. The cold, the bread, a bird at the window. The kind of quiet talk that passes between two people who have, against all odds, become friends across the width of 300 years. "Do you regret it?" Patrick asked one cold night. "Crossing the sea at all? Knowing now what it cost?" Oisín considered for a long time. "No," he said finally. "I had years with her that most men never dream of. I held children with her eyes. I saw a land of endless light. I would not give those back. The cost was terrible, but the gift was real. Both are true." The cost was terrible, but the gift was real. Both are true. That too is worth carrying into sleep. Most of the deepest things in a life are not one or the other. They are both at once. The great love that also breaks your heart. The choice that saves you and costs you. Oisín had stopped needing them to be simple. So, in time, can we all? He began to dream of her more often now. Vivid dreams, clearer than memory. The bright cliff, the golden hair moving in its unfelt wind. Niamh, turning to him with her faint closed smile, saying without words, "Soon." He woke from those dreams not in grief, but in something close to peace. The sea between them was thinning. He could feel it. And across the sea, on her bright cliff, Niamh dreamed too. The old stories are shy about this part, and so will I be. But they hint that in those last nights, the two faithful gazes finally began to meet, not in waking, where the sea forbade it, but in sleep, where no sea has ever held two hearts apart. Soon they told each other. Soon. Before we follow Oisín to the very end, let us pause to ask how any of this survived at all. Because a story told once in a garden, by a dying man to a single monk, should have vanished with them both. And yet here it is, in your ears more than 1,000 years later. How? It survived because monks like Patrick made a quiet, radical choice. Rather than erase the old pagan world, they wrote it down. In monasteries across Ireland, the tales of the Fianna were copied and recopied, generation after generation, by candlelight, in beautiful, careful hands. The new faith became the keeper of the old stories. And it survived in voices, too. Long after the monks, Irish storytellers carried these tales from hearth to hearth, from grandparent to child, through famine and exile and centuries of hard winters. Tír na nÓg was spoken aloud in cottages, and on ships, and in faraway lands wherever the Irish carried their memory. So Oisín's last wish came true in a way he could not have imagined. He asked that his world not be burned, and it was not. It was carried in ink, in song, in the mouths of the poor, in the prayers of the faithful, across 1,000 years of darkness and change, all the way to this quiet night, and to you. There is something quietly moving in that. You, lying here tonight, are the far end of an unbroken chain of remembering that began with a grieving old man in a garden. His bright land lives because someone in every generation chose to pass it on. Tonight, simply by listening, you are keeping it alive too. Now back to the garden. The end is near. Deep winter held the monastery now. Snow lay soft on the round tower and the bare apple tree. Oisín grew very quiet, very still. He slept most of the day, but each evening he asked to be helped to the window that faced west, so he could watch the sun go down toward the sea, toward her. Patrick sat with him through those evenings. They did not always speak. There was no longer any need. Two old men, one watching the sun set on his long life, the other keeping him company as he had kept company with so many at the threshold. The fire low, the snow falling, the light going gold and then gray and then gone. "Tell me of her once more," Patrick said gently one of those last evenings, "Niamh, as you first saw her." And Oisín's tired face softened and lit, the way a face does at the deepest and oldest love. "She came out of the sea on a white horse," he said, "with hair like the morning, and she knew my name after everything." That is still the brightest moment of my life, the moment someone crossed the whole world and knew my name. The brightest moment of his life was not the giant's defeat, nor the deathless feasts, nor the crown of paradise. It was simply being known, being chosen, hearing his own name in the mouth of someone who had come a very long way to say it. Maybe that is the brightest moment of most lives, to be truly seen by someone who stayed to look. That night, the dreams came stronger than ever. Neve stood on the bright cliff, but the sea between them had grown thin as a veil, thin as the breath fogging the cold window. She held out her hand across it, and this time her fingers nearly reached his. Soon, her eyes said, "The horse is saddled. The road is opening. Soon." This is the darkest and softest hour of the whole tale. The old man is very near the end now. The fire of 300 years has burned down to its last embers, but unlike most who reach this hour, Oisín is not afraid, and not alone, and not without hope. He is simply tired and ready, and turned toward the west, waiting for a door to open. Patrick did not leave his side now. He had buried many. He knew the signs, the breathing slower, the hands cooler, the eyes turning more and more toward something past the walls of the room. He held the old man's hand and spoke softly to him of the far green shore, and did not let go. "Can you see it?" Patrick asked gently, for the old man's eyes had grown bright and far away. Oisín smiled. "The sea is thin tonight," he whispered, "thin as a veil. And there is a white horse on the shore, and someone with hair like the morning waiting. She is waving me across. The road is open at last." We will stay with him just a little longer at this threshold gently, the way Patrick stayed. There is no fear here, no struggle, only an old man at the end of an impossibly long road, watching a sea grow thin and a horse grow near and a beloved face turn toward him at last across the water. Breathe slow, the crossing is almost here. Across the sea, the old stories say Neve woke from her own dream and rose and called for the white horse, and rode down to the bright shore where she had waited so long. She did not know how the crossing would come. She only knew in the deepest part of her that tonight her long looking would finally be answered. And so, on two shores of one uncrossable sea, two long vigils came at last toward their close. He turned west on a winter bed, she turned east on a bright shore, both of them watching the water, both of them after 300 years apart, about to learn whether faithful looking is ever truly answered. But we are getting ahead of the gentle pace. Let us draw back, just a breath, and let the night deepen. The monk keeps his vigil, the snow keeps falling, the embers keep their low red glow, and the old man rests, eyes bright on a far shore, while the whole quiet world holds still around him. In these last hours, Oisín drifted between the room and the shore. Sometimes he was an old man in a bed, holding a monk's hand. Sometimes he was young again, on a white horse, the salt spray bright on his face. The two worlds he had lived in were growing gently transparent to each other, the way they do at the very end. "Stay a moment more," Patrick murmured, not to hold him back, but to walk him to the very edge. "I am here. You are not crossing alone." And though Oisín's eyes were on the far bright shore, he squeezed the monk's hand once gently to say, "I know. Thank you. I have not been alone, not at the end. It is a small mercy, but a real one, to come to the end of the road with a hand in yours." Oisín had crossed a whole sea once to escape death, terrified and alone in spirit. Now death came to him quietly, in a warm room, with a friend beside him and a beloved waiting beyond. The thing he had most feared had become the thing carrying him home. The night wore toward its deepest hour. The snow thickened, and then near dawn began to ease. A faint paleness touched the eastern sky beyond the monastery. And in his bed turned toward the west, the old man's breathing grew very slow and very calm and very far away. We will not rush these last few breaths. The old stories never did. They lingered here, in the hush before the crossing, because they understood that endings told gently are not frightening. They are tender. They are the soft folding shut of a long, full book. So let us linger too, and breathe slow and stay with him a little longer in the pale dawn light. Oisín's lips moved. Patrick leaned close to hear. "The sea is gone," the old man breathed, with wonder, with joy. "There is no sea between us now. She is so close. I can see her face. She is holding out her hand. His own thin hand lifted, just slightly from the quilt, reaching, after 300 years, towards something at last within reach. And here the story does what only the oldest and kindest stories do. It does not tell us plainly whether the bright land was real or only the last beautiful dream of a dying man. It leaves the veil drawn, because at this threshold, the question does not matter. What matters is that he was reaching toward love, and unafraid, and not alone. Whatever waited beyond the veil, this much the story tells for certain. The reaching hand grew still, the slow breath went out, and did not come again. And the deep lines of grief and longing on the old man's face smoothed, all at once, into a peace so complete that Patrick, watching, found he could not grieve, only marvel. Patrick sat with him a long while in the quiet dawn, still holding the cooling hand. He was not sad, exactly. He had walked many to this door, and rarely had he seen one go through it so unafraid, so clearly toward something, so plainly going home. "Go well, Oisín of the Fianna," he murmured. "Go west. She is waiting." And the old stories, the kind ones, the ones told to comfort children afraid of the dark, say that at that very moment, across the sea, on the bright eastern shore of Tir na Nog, Ni of the golden hair felt a hand close warm around her own at last. And she wept, and she smiled, and she did not let go. Whether that is true, no one can say. It is the gift the storytellers gave him and gave us. A reunion the waking world could not provide, offered softly on the far side of the veil. You may believe it, or you may not. The story does not mind, it only wanted, after so much loss, to set one warm light at the very end. So it did. That same morning, true to his word, Patrick buried the old man facing west, on a low green hill within sight of the sea, with the snow melting and the first faint promise of spring in the cold air, turned the right way, still looking, even in the long sleep, faithful to the end. And he kept his other promise too. The great book of Oisín's tales was copied and guarded and carried down the generations, exactly as he had vowed. The bright land did not burn, the Fianna did not vanish. An old pagan world and a gentle Christian monk, against every expectation, became the keepers of each other's memory. So both of Oisín's last wishes came true. He was buried facing west, still turned toward her, and his world was not lost but remembered. He had failed to keep his footing on the horse. He had failed the simple rule. But the things that truly mattered to him, his love and his world, those he did not fail, those endured. The years passed. Patrick himself grew old and went at last through his own door into whatever bright country waited for him. But before he did, he made certain the tale was safe. He had given an old stranger in a field his bread, his patience, and his ear. And in return he had received a whole vanished world to carry forward. A fair trade, he thought. The fairest of his life. And the bright land? It is still there, the storytellers say. Tir na Nog has not sunk. It lies where it always lay, just past the western edge of the world, beyond the reach of any ordinary ship. A land where no one ages, and no one weeps for long, where, on a high green cliff, two figures now stand together, looking east no longer, for the one they waited for has come. That is the comfort the old Irish wove into the close of this tale. Not a denial of loss, they knew loss too well for that, but a quiet insistence that loss is not the final word, that faithfulness is answered somehow, somewhere, that the ones who wait are not waiting in vain. It is a kind thing to believe tonight. You are allowed to believe it. His children, the golden boy and the gray-eyed girl, had their father back at last. The old songs say the girl sang for him the very airs he had taught her, the Irish airs, carried across the sea and kept alive in a deathless land, and that he wept to hear his own lost world sung back to him by his own child, in his own tongue. So in the end, both his worlds were made whole. In Ireland, his story lived on in ink and voice. In Tir na Nog, his family was complete again, and his songs sung, and his long looking ended. He had lost everything once, falling from a horse onto the grass. And he had, in the deepest sense, lost nothing that truly mattered after all. That is the heart of it, told all the way through. A young man who chased a life without loss, and learned, the long hard way, that a life you can lose is the only kind worth holding. Who broke one small vow out of one great kindness, and who found, past the very end, that love kept faithfully is never quite lost, however wide the sea. We have walked the whole length of it now, you and I, From a tired evening, to a misted shore, to a giant's tower, to a deathless land, to a gray monastery garden, and home at last across an uncrossable sea. It has been a long road. You have done well to walk it this far. There is only a little more, and it is the gentlest part of all. So let the bright land glow on its far horizon. Let Neve and Oisín stand together on their high green cliff, the long parting ended. Let the monk's book rest safe in its chapel, carrying the old world forward. And let the gray sea grow calm and quiet, the way a story grows calm and quiet, as it draws toward its close. There's a little more to say about what this old story has been quietly teaching, and why it has lasted so long, and what it might leave gently in your hands as you drift toward sleep. But the tale itself, the great arc of it, is complete now. Oisín has come home. Rest in that a moment, before we go on. Before we close, one last pause to notice how strange and lovely it is that this particular story survived. The old Irish wrote down a whole conversation, like the one Oisín and Patrick shared. They called such meetings the acalam, the colloquy, the talking together of the old world and the new. Think of how easily it might have gone the other way. The new faith might have called the old gods devils and burned every tale and left us nothing but silence where the Fianna once rode. It happened so in many lands, but not here. Here someone chose to listen instead, to write it down instead, to keep it. That choice, to honor a world not your own rather than erase it, is one of the quietest and greatest kinds of love there is. It is why a pagan hero's grief can still reach you tonight, told in a sleep story 1,000 years and an ocean away. Somebody, long ago, decided you deserve to hear it, and so you can. So when you hear of fairylands beyond the western sea, of warriors and white horses and the price of paradise, remember that these are not only pretty inventions, they are the carefully kept memory of a real people who loved and lost and refused to let their wonder die. You are holding something they protected for you? Hold it gently. And now the colloquy of the old world and the new is done, just as it was done in that garden so long ago. The hero has told his tale, the monk has kept it, and the keeping has reached, at last, all the way to you. That is the true magic of this story, not the white horse, the remembering. Now, let us begin gently to say goodnight. Let the images soften now, the shore, the white horse on the bright sea, the golden hair moving in its unfelt wind. Let them grow gentle and dim, the way the world grows gentle and dim at the edge of sleep. You do not need to hold them tightly. They will keep. If your day asks too much of you, let this old story take a little of the weight. Oisín carried far more than you did, for far longer, and he came home in the end. Whatever you are carrying tonight, you are allowed to set it down for a while. The sea will hold it, the story will hold it. You can rest. Notice your breath now, the way Oisín's grew slow and calm at the end. There is no road left to walk tonight, no vow to keep, no sea to cross, only the soft dark, and the quiet, and the gentle pull of sleep, drawing you down as kindly as the white horse once carried a young man over the waves. The fire has burned low. The tale is told. The old storyteller's voice grows soft now, the way it always does at the very end, when the listeners have gone quiet, and the night has folded in close and warm around the dying embers. There is nothing more you need to do. Nowhere you need to be. The story is complete, and it asks nothing of you now but that you rest. Let your eyes stay closed. Let the images drift. Let the warm dark carry you, slow and safe, out over the gentle sea of sleep. Somewhere beyond the western edge of the world, the bright land glows on, soft and patient. No one there grows old. No one weeps for long, and tonight, two figures stand together on a high green cliff, no longer looking east, no longer waiting, at peace, at last. As soon will you be. Let that be the last image you carry down into sleep, not the fall, not the grief, but the bright shore where the long parting ended, and two who waited found each other at last. Faithful looking answered, love, kept across an uncrossable sea, the kindest thing the old story had to give. We will let the bright shore fade now, slowly, like a lamp turned gently down. There is no hurry. The story is safe. It will be here again whenever you wish to return to it. For now, simply rest and let the soft gold light grow dimmer and warm and kind. Your breathing is slow now. Your body is heavy and warm. The room is dark and safe around you. The long story has been told, and you have followed it faithfully all the way to its gentle end. That is enough. That is more than enough. You can let go now. The sea is calm, the bright land is at peace. The old storyteller's voice is almost a whisper now, fading softly into the dark, the way all the best stories do when the listener is nearly asleep and does not need to hear the end to feel that all is well. Rest now. The whole long tale has carried you here, to this quiet, warm, safe place at the edge of sleep. There is nothing left to do but drift. The bright land will keep, the story will keep, and you tonight are held as gently as a young man once was, on a white horse over a calm and shining sea. And so we come to the very last of it, the whole great circle closing. A young man left a green shore on a white horse, chasing a life without loss. An old man came home across the same sea, having learned that loss is the price of love, and love is worth any price. He gave up 300 years of youth in a single fall, and gained, on the far side of it, the one thing the deathless land could never give him, an ending that meant something. A homecoming, a reunion, a love made whole not in spite of loss, but on the far side of it. That is the great turn the whole story was always reaching for. The land of eternal youth could not make him happy. Only a love he could lose, and keep, and cross a whole world to honor could do that. The deathless shore gave him forever, but it took an ending to give him peace. So if you take anything from this old Irish tale into your sleep, let it be this gentle thing. Your life is brief and breakable and can be lost, and that is exactly what makes it precious. You do not need a deathless land. You need only to love what you have while you have it. That is the whole secret. Oisín learned it the long way. It is yours for free. The tale is told now, all the way to its end. The white horse is at rest. The lovers are reunited. The book is kept, and you are nearly asleep, held warm and safe at the close of a very old, very kind story. Rest now. There is only a little more, and it asks nothing of you but to drift. Let us sit with the meaning of it a while, quietly, in the soft dark. This old story has been carrying something for a very long time. Now it can hand it to you. The white horse first. It carried him away, and it carried him back, and it ran on water as easily as land. It is the thing that crosses between worlds, desire perhaps, the longing that moves us from one life into another. But notice, the horse alone could not save him. It could carry him anywhere, except into the past he longed for, some distances no horse can cross. Time is one. That is the story's first quiet truth. Then the ground he must not touch, such a strange rule, until you feel it. The past is a country you may ride through in memory, but set your full weight on it, and it claims all the years you owe. We all know that ground, the old house, the childhood street. We may visit, we may look, but the moment we try to truly stand there again, time reminds us how much has quietly passed. And the broken girth strap, he faced a giant and did not fall. He fell to a buckle. The great trials rarely undo us. It is the small, ordinary moment, when we lean too far, that does. But here is the tender turn. He fell because he stopped to help a stranger. His undoing and his goodness were the same act. The very best of him was what broke the rule. The story does not call that foolish. It calls it human. Sometimes faithfulness to who you are will cost you the thing you were trying to protect, and still it was right. And Tir na nog itself, the deathless land. The old Irish dreamed it as perfect mercy. No sickness, no winter, no graves. The very thing a grieving people would most long for. Yet the story is wiser than the wish. It shows us that a life without loss is also a life without weight. Where nothing can be lost, nothing can be fully held. That is the deepest truth the tale was built to carry. The thing that can be lost is the only thing that can be truly loved. Mortality is not only the curse, it is the gift. Oisín chased a life he could not lose, and found it hollow. He came home to a life he could lose, and found it precious. He had it backward, as we so often do. And Neve's golden hair always moving in a wind no one else could feel. She was the longing itself, beautiful, real, and bound to a world we cannot stay in without paying. Yet she was no trickster. She loved him truly, and warned him faithfully, and waited 300 years. The story honors her longing as much as his. Faithfulness on both shores of the sea. Two people, on two shores of an uncrossable water, each turned toward the other. That image is the soul of the story. Love held faithfully across a distance that cannot be closed. and the monk who chose to write the old world down rather than burn it. He is the story's quiet hero. Memory, choosing mercy. The new age, kneeling to keep the old. Because of that one choice, a pagan hero's grief still reaches you tonight. The story's own survival is part of its meaning. Love, it says, is the act of refusing to let a thing be forgotten. So the tale gives us gently 3 truths to hold: that the past cannot be stood in again, that what can be lost is what can be loved, and that nothing truly loved is ever wholly lost. Those 3 truths do not cancel each other. They hold together the way grief and gratitude hold together. The old Irish never asked you to choose, they asked you only to feel both. Carry that with you towards sleep. Your life is brief, and that is why it is precious. Love what you have while you have it. The whole old story, in a single quiet breath. This story did not stay in one garden. For 1,500 years, the Irish have carried it through monasteries, through famine, through exile to far shores. Wherever they went, Tír na nÓg went too. The monks wrote it into great medieval books, the Acallam na Señorach, the colloquy of the old men. Oisín and Patrick, talking together, pagan and Christian, the old world handed gently to the new. And the storytellers, the Sianchai, kept it alive aloud. By cottage fires in winter dark, grandparents gave it to children, who gave it to their own, an unbroken chain of voices across the centuries. Centuries later, the poets returned to it. Yeats and the writers of the Irish revival found in Oisín a symbol of their own longing for an older, brighter Ireland that the modern world had nearly forgotten. The name Tír na nÓg itself became a kind of treasure in the Irish tongue, the land of youth, a phrase for any longed-for place beyond reach, any paradise we ache for and cannot stay in. It echoes still in songs, in films, in the names of places and ships and children. Whenever someone speaks of a fairyland beyond the western waves, Oisín's white horse is somewhere in the words. And the deeper question it asks has never aged. Would you take a life without loss if you could? And what, without knowing, would you be giving up? Every generation answers it afresh. That is why it survives, not because it is old, but because it is true. It speaks to anyone who has loved a place, lost a time, or ached for a paradise they could not keep. And tonight, simply by listening, you have joined the chain. You are now one of the keepers, the far end of 1,500 years of voices. The bright land lives a little longer because of you. So rest now, keeper of an old bright tale. Your part is done, and done well. The story is safe in you, and it asks only that you carry it gently into sleep. The fire is low now, the tale is told. There is nothing left to do but rest, and breathe, and let the dark grow soft. Somewhere far to the west, the bright land glows on, soft and patient. No one there grows old, no one weeps for long. Next time, somewhere colder, older. A different shore, a different fire. Something is already waiting there in the dark. You can almost hear it, but not tonight. Tonight there is only the quiet and the warm dark and rest. Let the bright shore fade now, slow as a lamp turned gently down. The story is safe. It will keep. Your breathing is slow, the dark is soft and safe. There is nowhere to be but here, drifting towards sleep. We open one old story slowly, every week. No test, no hurry, just somewhere quiet to land. So come back when the day has asked too much. There will be another old story waiting. We'll be here when you're ready. The sea is calm, the bright land is at peace. The old voice is almost a whisper now, fading into the dark. Sleep now. You are held gently, as a young man once was, on a white horse, over a calm and shining sea. Good night.